Welcome, folks. As usual, we're hanging on just a couple minutes as folks join us on the Zoom meeting. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, I will now call this meeting of the South Woodbury School Board to order. We will begin as usual by turning it over to Marnie Jackson for the land acknowledgement. Thank you.
Thank you. South Woodbury School District acknowledges that we live on the ancestral homelands of the Lower Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Suquamish, whose ancestors have had a generations-long relationship of spiritual and embodied connection with this land and these waters since time immemorial. One recent opportunity to remember that heritage took place in Langley this Monday when we celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day. And in Langley, we had the opportunity to join with members of the Snohomish tribe for a ceremonial tree planting. Members of the tribe sang songs, told about their heritage here on this island, and planted a tree that had been given to them in a ceremonial fashion by the community of Langley a year ago during the canoe landing that took place last July. So that's an opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about the Snohomish history here in this place. The opportunity to deepen connections with Snohomish tribal members will be ongoing, and they hope to bring their canoe journey landings to Langley again. So in my personal capacity, not as a board member of South Woodbury, but as a personal person, feel free to email me if you'd like to learn more about ways to get involved with participating as a volunteer to support that future canoe landing. Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't able to make that one. I'm glad you were. It sounded like it was a fantastic opportunity to connect to some of the folks who have history and have past and present here, past, present, and future.
Indeed, it was beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. This is a workshop, so our Robert's Rules is a little bit lighter here. If you have a question and you're in person, please just wave a hand or let us know and we'll get the question to you. If you are on the Zoom meeting, please just type in your name and location. If you've already done that once, just type in question or something and hit enter in the Q&A function, and then that'll let us know that you have something coming in so we can pause and not keep going on beyond. We're really excited to have school improvement plans here tonight. It's always fantastic to see how the goals that the board sets for the superintendent gets translated down to the building level and then to the classroom level and even to the student level. And these are our opportunity to see that. And so I love seeing them each year, and I'm really excited to see what you all have for us tonight. Dr. Moshe, I'll turn it over to you so you can turn it over to the admin.
Thank you for the opportunity to really showcase our principals' work with their staff. Just as a matter of public knowledge, it is Principal Appreciation Month. And these folks are the best team I've ever worked with. The work they have done putting this together with their staff just makes me so proud. So I'm going to start us off, but they're really going to do the majority of the work. I am in charge of moving the slides, however. So as we know, and the board has been working on our vision and mission, we're expecting that every student is a lifelong learner, multiculturally engaged, literate, and an active member of their community who's ready to go out into the world. The board set 3 goals for us. We've talked about the goals and the action plans at the last meeting. So tonight our focus is on goal 2, which is about prioritizing training and implementing best practices in our district so that our students are ready to meet that vision and mission. So without any further hesitation, I'm going to move to Jeff Fankhauser. Dr. Fankhauser is in charge of our assessment, and he's going to talk to us about the global picture of how we've been doing, and then each principal will talk about what's happening at their level to continue the journey. Jeff?
Good evening, everybody. I want to just go over a little bit first to start how the district is measured in relation to other school districts and what we do as a district to measure that with our students. And all of the information that I'm going to present here shortly can be found on the OSPI report card, where you can look up any school, any district in the state, and you can look at historical information around assessment and many other key indicators. I'm going to focus tonight on the assessment components that we are doing. A couple of things that I think are important is that we do what's called benchmarking and formative assessment using the iReady system for English language arts and math. I'll refer to that mostly as ELA and math. Those are benchmarked fall, winter, and spring at the K-8 level. We have a kindergarten through 4th grade literacy screening that happens in September. We do the Washington Kids Assessment, as it's called, the Kindergarten Inventory of Developmental Skills in the fall. That winds up at the end of October. And then throughout the year, whenever we have a new student with English language learning as a focus, we do what's called the WIDA screener. And in the spring, we do an annual assessment of their progress as it relates to the WIDA standards for English language learners. The key component is the Smarter Balanced State assessments that are done in every district, grades 3, 8, and 10 for ELA, 3, 8, and 10 for math, and then also our science assessments in 5, 8, and grade 11. So what I've tried to do here is capture some pre-COVID information to help frame our discussion. So I have our ELA performance in all of those grade bands. Pre-COVID, which the last time that was in the spring of 18-19. And on the left, you see the state of Washington. That's the state and the whole. And on the red side, you're seeing the school district performance in each one of those grade bands. I'll just let that sit for a second. As you can see, we traditionally at every grade band, for the most part, outperform the state, some significantly. And as I look at this, we continue to perform better as we get through the grade bands and culminate in high school in 11th grade. And it's assessed in 10th grade. Some years it was done in 11th grade. The last few years it's been done in 10th grade, but that's kind of the high school culminating assessment. This last year, if you go back one, just real quick, let me say this last year, post-COVID was our first time we did an assessment in October and we did another assessment in the spring. And you can see the entire state has seen some impact to the COVID years and the pandemic learning. But as you can see from the performance, it depends on the grade level. The district is outperforming the state in almost every grade band. And as you can see significantly again, as we get into that culminating assessment in 10th grade. Okay. These are our math numbers. So if you want to take a look and see pre-COVID and then post-COVID, you can see the math numbers are pretty interesting across the state and tells a little different picture than ELA does. The entire state is impacted right now, even more significantly than it was in the past. And the question always comes up, is that the assessment? Is it learning? Is it lack of learning? Is it, the impact of COVID? I guess we'll see next year. But as you can see from the assessment numbers, the district is gradually exceeding the standards at the state and at some levels significantly. Science, you can see again, we have our pre-COVID numbers at grades 5, 8, and 11. And you can see how significantly we continue to outperform as we head into 11th grade through science in the district, outperforming the state significantly. Anybody have any questions about ELA, math, or science? Yes, sir.
What's the column on the left stand for, and how do we stand up for the country?
So not every state takes the same assessment. So as far as how do we stand in comparison to, say, Alabama, we don't know. We certainly have a state view that we can look at, but they take a different assessment. But as far as our assessment in the state of Washington, the left side is the state overall, and the red side is the South Whidbey School District.
Taking the left column, it stops at 80. Is that 80% of possible?
Yeah, great question. That's passing. So there's 4 criterion in the state: below standard, basically passing, which is level 3, and then 4 is exceeding standard. So it depends on the grade band and the subject, what that actual criterion is determined to be. But you can read that as saying that, for example, last year in 11th grade, the state was about 45% passing in science, and we were 65%.
Can you correlate that to my 1950 ABCD grades?
Not really, because we're talking about a performance at standard rather than just a grade on the work that you were doing in class. So,
But Rufus, you could relate it to like military rankings. So you're gonna have to help me with my eval language, but you have kind of like stay the same, and then there's like should promote and then must promote on your rankings, right?
That happened after I left.
Oh man, I tried. Well, it's like, so basically a should promote would be like a 3. So it means like you're doing what you need to do, you're on standard, but you're not going above beyond.
That's what number?
That would be a 3 out of a 4. You don't see the 3s or the 4s on there, but in order to pass the assessment, you have to earn at least a 3.
So this is the percentage of students that have gotten a 3 or 4
Yeah.
on the examinations.
Yep.
that is
So
correct.
If we
Is there any interest in trying to correlate it to grades that the majority of the country understand?
Actually, the country has gone to a standards-based assessment of
Maybe I should say adults.
Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 being unsatisfactory, 2 being,
4 is a 4.0.
no, it's totally
What's a
different.
4.0?
Rufus, it's a totally different grading system now. It is not A, B, C, D, F until you're in college. So K through 12, even if students get grades in class, when they are graded on these assessments, they're either unsatisfactory, basic, meet the standards, which is a 3, or a 4, which means they've exceeded standards. So it's specifically not A, B, C, D, F. What this chart is telling you is the percentage of students who meet or exceed the standard set for them. As we go to the next slide, when we talk about how our students are doing right now, we can look at how many students are meeting the standard, what percentage of our students need help to meet the standards, and what percentage of our students are really struggling to
Are
meet
these
those
state
standards.
standards or Southern School District standards?
They're state and federal standards.
These are the Common Core state standards. And Washington adopted those and many states have across the country.
And Rufus, to answer your earlier question about how do we as Washington State compare on a national level? This last year, we were ranked 4th overall, so 4th out of 50. And that's divided up between higher education, where we ranked 2nd, and preschool through 12th grade, where we ranked 11th. So for kind of the purposes of this data, we would rank as a state overall. So the blue columns on the left would be 11th in the country.
I'm sorry, I'm taking extra time. How do the students, are they able to rate themselves in terms of I am doing better than Johnny or Sally?
That's not how folks try. That's not how the intent is for them to rate themselves
The answer is no.
against each other. They can look at the 1, 2, 3, or 4 that they get and compare to their classmates, but the intent is to see if they are meeting the standard.
I guess I'm thinking of the competition of life.
Are you wondering if there's only a certain number of kids who can score a 3? Or a
I
certain
don't even
number?
understand what a 3 is. I'm
Okay.
wondering if
So,
students can look around the classroom.
I'm going to give you what I don't want to give you, which is if you score a 1, it's an F. Okay, if you score a 2,
I got that. I'm wondering if Bill and I are in the
we
same
set
class
it up
and we're
for
competitive.
competition. Yes, they can compare themselves to each other. As a school district, as a state, it's not about that. It's how they compete against themselves to a
It's
standard.
not about competition.
No, it's
Rose?
not about competition.
Okay.
Can I just give you a table analogy? Is this a 6-foot table?
Depends on if it's horizontal or vertical.
Well, let's say it's horizontal. Okay. If the standard was to build a 6-foot table and you built a 2-foot table, you would not meet standard. It'd probably be basic. If you made a 4-foot table, you'd be approaching the standard. If you built a 6-foot table, right on, you've made the standard. No, it's okay. But if you built an 8-foot table, you'd be exceeding the standard, right? So that's kind of how the standards work on the system. If we go to the next one, I'll show you how we use this in practical use. So this is our iReady benchmarking. We do this in the fall, winter, and spring. So all of the students in our K-8, kindergarten through 8th grade, take ELA and math. And if you look in here, this is our ELA initial placement last year. And it's kind of hard to see, but the faint line underneath each domain and the faint triangle is where the students were in the September. And then if you look to the left, that's where the students ended up in the spring. And visually, what we're looking for is more green, less red. So if you kind of look at that, you kind of get an idea. We're wanting our students to pass. And if you look on the right, these are all the different domains of English language arts. So one of those stands for vocabulary. One of them stands for phonics. And as you can see initially, we had 42%, 59% basically at the end and at tier 1, which is green, and we started at 42%. So we grew, those students grew over the course of the school year significantly. And as if you look at the slide online, you'll be able to see the little green faded area there. That's where they placed in September and where they grew to in the spring. And so what we're looking for is that green line to grow significantly. So if we look at the next slide, I'll show you what that means by each school. So at the elementary school, grades K through 4, we have a diagnostic 1, that's the fadey line underneath, and then the final diagnostics at the top. So initially we had 32% in that green typical growth placement. But by the end of the year, we had increased that to 56%. And on the other side of things, we had started at 29%, highly at risk, below standard, struggling to make progress and standard, and we had reduced that number to 10%. So again, we want to extend our greens, narrow our yellows, and certainly reduce our reds. South Campus, you can see similar trend. And so if you look at the right numbers, you got 259 students out of 336 took the assessment, and that was their performance. At the South Campus, 191 out of 217. And again, at the middle school, a little bit higher. We're looking for growth in all of those areas, and more green is better. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, you said it. When do they take the first diagnosis?
The window is
in the year?
September 15 to October 1st. Is that last 2 weeks of September.
And then final?
May 1st to May 15th.
Thanks.
And the SBACs are done in, the Smarter Balance assessments are done in May.
How come everybody didn't take the assessment?
We have students that get sick during the window or they miss, and we try to do it during the window. So the goal is for everybody to take the assessment.
Or if you have students who move in mid-year or students who leave that aren't there for the entire school year.
Being a skeptic, it seems that there's a potential for not testing poorly performing students. How is that potential avoided?
So are you talking about if a student refuses to take the test, or would you say the
I don't
school would
understand
just
why all
not?
students don't take the test.
Right.
All
Well,
students are supposed to take the test, and the state holds us to at least 95% of the students taking the assessment.
Yeah.
So we can't do that because they know how many students we have and who the students are. And if they don't take the assessment and we don't meet the 95% criteria of students having taken the assessment, then we get dinged on that.
There are a couple of things too that are important to think about. For example, in kindergarten, we take the WA kids in the fall. They don't take it until the spring. We have homeschool students that are counted in the total. We have students that move in and out of the district. We also have parents who refuse to allow their children to take assessments. So we call those refusals. And so we track those a little differently, but they're all in these numbers.
And Rufus, just a point of clarification. So iReady is an in-district assessment that we do in South Whidbey. The previous slides that we were talking about with the columns, that's the state assessment. So this test is kind of a dipstick for our educators to know kind of where are our students coming at and what do we need to focus on. So when you disaggregate the data from these tests, it'll say, these are the skills that your students overall are struggling with. So when you see the number, Dr. Finkhauser, if you could go forward one slide.
Order back.
Forward. So when you see, oh, I guess back then. So when you see like 261 out of 326, that's not that 259 students didn't take the state assessment. It's that 259 students were not present during that first testing window for the in-district assessment.
That testing window one day?
No, it's like a month.
Yeah.
So
Can,
you,
month?
can I interrupt?
It's 2
And
weeks.
We have a lot to cover, and this data is really important as data. So I'd like to have Jeff share the data with the board so that we can get a sense. We can certainly discuss testing and why we do and how we do, but I'd really like to get the principals through the significant report that they have. These are only the first 3 slides. So
And
Jeff,
I'm happy
continue.
to stay and answer any questions you might have later too. As far as math goes, we had a similar process, and you can see if you look at the fainter triangle, how small that green is, and then overall how large that red triangle component is. We always talk about the yellow as our opportunity zone. This is the middle. These are the students that we believe we can move into. Green, definitely as best as we can. And as you can see on the left, quite a bit of improvement there. If we go to the next level, and go back one just real quick. If you look at those domains, that's really important to the teachers, because the teachers in the classrooms are basically taking those placements from each student. They're grouping students for their curriculum. They're taking a look at each one of these domain components, and that's how they make instructional decisions throughout the school year as to what to teach as they move forward.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Fankhauser, but they actually get even more detailed than that. So they can see exactly what skills they need to work on in their classroom.
It's really quite remarkable the amount of information we do have now. Yeah. And the diagnostic has been super positive to help teachers to make those decisions. If we go to the next slide, you'll see, again, this is by school, this is math, and that is, we hit one too many. There we go. Back. There we go. And so if you take a look there, again, the movement from the fall to the spring is really remarkable. At the North Campus, we've moved so many. Again, South Campus moving, middle school is moving. So we are having remarkable growth from our students when it comes to a diagnostic approach at looking at the information. Okay, I'm now going to pass to Mrs. Richards.
So that is the overview of assessment results. Each building principal will talk about it at their level. So Susie.
Great, thank you. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm excited to share what's going on at North Campus. If you could go to the next slide, please, Joe. One of the things that has been really important, I think you skipped one there. There we go. Thank you. One of the things that's been really important to our staff this year is sometimes we tend to reinvent the wheel every year, and we're really not doing that very intentionally, that we're looking back and kind of recommitting ourselves to our work around UDL, Universal Design for Learning, inclusionary practices. We're continuing to use the tools that we developed last year for our walkthrough and look fors and our alignment tools between our Danielson framework. In fact, I have a meeting Monday with all of our teachers that are on comprehensive evaluation this year to work with them on how we're looking at that alignment with their practice in the classroom and the Danielson framework. And then, of course, integrating in through all of that our restorative processes that we're really focusing on this year as well. Next slide, please. Again, reviewing and affirming our 21-22 goals and processes. We have had the opportunity to have 2 staff meetings that we've really dived into this work, looking at our district mission and goals. Everybody loves our goals this year, by the way. Goal 1 and 2 have really resonated with our staff. Feels like a really natural connection for us. Again, looking back at our restorative practices, what are we already doing? Where do we need to go? And again, that alignment work. Next slide, please. So how are we taking those district goals and kind of diving in again? Looked closely at our goals. Care and belonging really stood out for our staff. Learning about defining and co-creating that inclusive educational community. And so the approach we've taken as we've developed this is, okay, what are we doing on the ground? What does it really look like in the classroom and in the building? We're really seeing some needs to revisit what are called zones of regulation, helping children understand their emotions and how to regulate their behavior, because a lot of our children have missed out, especially our youngest children, on preschool experiences. And so we have to help them to be able to do school before they can really focus on academics at that young age. So putting a lot of energy there right now in our SEL curriculum. We're really looking at how we enhance student voice even at this youngest age, helping the children. Every classroom was really exciting to see them take our ORCA code and create classroom norms in student language. Focus a lot this year. We're focusing on self-monitoring tools. So the children really know how they are doing and they can learn to track their own growth. using that restorative practice to reteach behavioral expectations. And then really, this is a big look for me when I'm in the classroom, is those clear academic objectives, student-friendly language, learning targets. What are we doing today? Why are we doing it? Along with the behavioral expectations. Next slide, please. More of these goals. We've got a lot of these that we've brainstormed. I'll just pull out a couple. We really are so excited. Our PTA is coming back. Family engagement is such a huge part of where we're going. Expanding our opportunities, since our fourth graders are going to be staying with us next year. We're really building up that student leadership component and having more of those opportunities. I've got students in my room today. They came in and said, we want to do an overnight in the gym. Well, we're probably not going to be doing that, but let's talk about other things that we can do. So they're hearing they're using their voices, which is really exciting. How do we measure all these things that we want to do? Of course, we're going to be looking at what are we adding? How do we go from no clubs basically to adding these student-led? So just tracking on that data. Again, the look for us as we did last year. We're really tracking closely with our behavioral, we call them our blue sheets, how we're using restorative practices instead of discipline in the traditional sense. And then working on our SBAC interim assessments and getting a calendar going for that so that academic growth can be tracked. Next slide, please. Next goal. This is the one I'm very excited about. Again, we highlighted we're prioritizing training and implementation of best practices to create a learning environment supportive of every student's resilience and success. So I want to talk briefly. I want to kind of zoom through this so I can tell you more about our work. Our staff is really practicing UDL by designing our PLCs this year as a staff. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but today was the best PLC we've ever had. It was so fabulous. And then continuing, you're going to see a lot in our SIP about continuing the work. And then our farm, forest, and sea, and that environmental ed focus. It's really exciting. The state right now is putting a lot of money towards environmental education. The research is so compelling about the positive impacts on students, both academically and social and emotionally. And really, we're diving into this field STEM of getting students out in the environment and doing really powerful science.
Just a quick acronym note, PLC.
Professional learning communities. Thank you, Brooke.
I know that because my wife's a teacher,
Yes,
but
I appreciate
yeah.
that. Every Wednesday, we have time for either teacher directed, building directed, or district directed. Again, measurement is everything, right? We can talk about all these good things, but how are we really showing what we're doing? So especially around our PLC, we're going to be collecting a lot of data, started that today. In fact, looking at our student growth goal data, I'm starting those conversations with staff right now around establishing their student growth goals. And then we do what are called biweekly data teams, where every single teacher has 45 minutes. We look at every single student's progress. We look at their iReady data and how it's going, their DIBELS, which is another acronym, but it's a reading assessment. So diving into that data has been really, really important for us. Next slide, please. So this is what I'm excited about, and I'm going to talk fast because I don't want to take up too much time, but we are modeling UDL with our teachers, Universal Design for Learning, by going through a process. They brainstormed 15 professional development ideas. We did a vote where everybody got 3 dots. They narrowed that down to 6 priorities that they've established. Then each teacher in the building signed up for one of those to be a part of a leadership team who will really dive in and take us through those processes for the rest of the year. Joe, this would be a great time if you don't mind to pull up that other document. So this is what we did today. I went around to every one of the groups, and I could not be more excited to, that's all right. I can, while you're doing that, we can just go to the next. Okay, well, okay, I'll wait.
Zoom is great for many things, but showing multiple
I
documents. at
know, I
once
shouldn't have
is not one of them.
asked. So anyway, this is the document that each group completed today. This is one of our staff selected, cross-curricular integration and alignment and cross-grade level collaboration. So they went through these forms, every team today. What does your team need? What do they, what is the need that we have? What is the outcome their group hopes to achieve? What are the strategies and approaches that your team is going to engage in? What do you need from me? release time, funding to make this happen. And they in turn will then be going back to their teams and or to the staff as a whole and presenting their work that they engage in together. So it's great stuff. Do you mind going back to the, thank you. So I'll just show you really quickly and then I'll be done. I should have had somebody time me. Josh, 8 minutes. Okay, I'm going to be quick.
Well, while you're doing that, I know that our currently absent Joe really appreciates the measurable data there that you're working on. And I know that's something that we're all trying to get better at, is looking at how we can measure this. And
We
it's
have
wonderful
to.
to see that.
Yep. Okay. So just real quick, this is the groups that our staff have identified as their priorities for the year. Talked about the cross-curricular group around universal design for learning, trauma-informed practices, which is really big for us right now. Next slide, please. Environmental education are place-based, and you can see which teachers have signed up for which and how the kind of the brainstorming. Enhancing family events and family engagement is a big one for our staff right now. Our K4 ELA and literacy work. So yeah, that's a little snapshot. I talk fast. You may not get the whole gist of what we're doing, but it's staff directed and it's exciting. Okay, so this is our diagnostic data right now. Our baseline for fall, as Jeff showed from last year, this is right now. K is a little misleading. It looks so good, but it's a little misleading because it's really only 5 kindergartners up there. Only only the kindergartners from the K1 multi-age. Kindergartners typically just do the walk kids and not this assessment. So you can see we've got a lot of yellow. We've got work to do, but I know we're going to get there. It's part of the process as we move forward. And we are now diving into that diagnostic data at each grade level and seeing where are the really, like you were saying, Brooke, where are the really specific needs. Next slide, please. This is our reading data, a little stronger than math. We do have our new curriculum still in grades K2, and we're seeing some great progress around that and going through that process at 3-4. Next slide, please. So next steps are we just continue the work. I'm right now meeting with teachers around the growth goals, how we integrate those UDL look fors into that. 1 year's growth is what we're looking for in our key content areas on those student growth goals. We're continuing our use thanks to our inclusionary practices work, our peer observation that's really focusing on sharing best practices, that collaboration, dialogue, and relationship building. And then our outcomes, of course, for our students to be strong academically, socially, and emotionally. And just one little next step on ALE. I'm not going to jump in, but just to let you know, things are going very well. We have over 70 students. Their staff is participating with our staff in these processes. We're now based at South Campus, and we continue to have amazing community partners. So that's all for me. Any questions?
Staff board members? Did you have something? Yeah.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead. Let's get you, there's a mic right there. Just for those who are on Zoom so they can actually hear you.
You mentioned Danielson? What is
Yes.
that?
Danielson framework. So we have a state mandated teacher evaluation process, and where principals go in and evaluate teachers in the classroom. School districts were required to choose one of 3 frameworks. And we chose what's known as the Danielson framework, which came from a researcher by the name of Charlotte Danielson. And she gives key elements that we look for as we're going in and doing observations.
First year you used that?
No, we started in 2013 or 14. Yeah, it's been a number of years. Yep.
And you mentioned restorative practices instead of the discipline. Could you have an example of that?
Sure, absolutely. I live this every day. I have lots of examples, in fact. As an example, when 2 children have a conflict on the playground, instead of just putting them in a timeout, which we would have maybe done in the past, we'll sit down. We have people who are very trained in this process, and we help them to talk it out and to own their piece of the situation, to help them to make amends to one another and to talk through the situation. So we use it a lot with student conflict more than anything at this point at the elementary school. Yeah.
So it's primarily talking it out and trying to reason it out and come to a conclusion that everybody agrees with.
Yes, to the extent that, yeah, our children at our age, yes. But it's really about, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bill.
What if that doesn't happen?
Oh, we have other steps that we take, but we always start with the restorative process. It doesn't always, yeah, it doesn't always work, but that is our focus to begin with.
What would you do next?
They spend time with me. They may miss a recess. If it's a recess involved thing, they may have to do some writing around what they could have done differently this time. or
They may
next
still
time.
have to do the whether or not students talk it out, they still may face disciplinary action.
Oh, yeah, it's not a replacement. If I
not-
said that, I certainly didn't
You
mean
know,
that.
if then it can be both.
Yep.
Students can misbehave, have a consequence, and still engage in a restorative practice.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
So the possibilities for going the next step would be how serious it was.
Absolutely. Yep. And like I say, in kindergarten and first grade, it's often just having to help them with their social interactions is the majority at our level. It's going to look very different at Kayla and John's level.
Well, and
Um,
the belief for discipline is for students to engage in learning so that they improve their
Exactly.
behavior. I mean, that is
Exactly.
the whole point of discipline. And sometimes people look at discipline and think that the synonym for discipline is punishment. Discipline is about helping kids to learn to improve their behavior. And there may be consequence to their behavior, but it doesn't mean that they can't engage in a restorative practice.
Yeah, as I understand it, the idea being that they don't continue the behavior because they understand why it was wrong rather than because they're afraid of punishment.
Exactly. They understand the harm that they've caused, and how to make amends for that, if it's possible to make amends.
And that was used last year as well. So you've had success with it for what, 1 year? This is your second year?
Yeah,
Yeah, the whole point of this year's work is to create a culture of care and community beyond just having kids engage in a restorative practice if there's an infraction. It's the idea of creating community and trust and building trust with students so that they avoid conflict if they can.
And it's been implemented longer than 2 years because you implemented before COVID.
Yeah, we actually had staff going through training.
Yeah, it's been
pre-COVID.
several
Mhm.
years. This is the year, though, where we've gone completely K-12.
Yeah.
In the past, it's been pockets of implementation, and this year we moved to every teacher engaging in training around it. And students and the board in January.
Thank
Um,
you, Mrs. Richards.
I just had a couple of quick comments to add on. I love tying the grade levels together more tightly. I love that that's one of the things that the staff identified, because I think that's really useful for getting past that summer slump where you come back and you're not quite where you were when you left off because you had 3 months where you didn't do school. And I love having the purposes for each lesson. I love that that's an emphasis point. And if you're looking for somewhat restrained late events, you might think there's a local movie theater in the area that you might be able to work something out with.
I'm gonna switch to this mic because I think that one is cracking. So it's my pleasure to talk about, and my privilege to talk about the South Campus. The important decision that was made at the last board meeting to discuss transition of the 5th graders and the 6th graders to the other 2 school campuses, I think has been an important part of how we've weaved together our school improvement plan at the South Campus. Because what we want above all else is for this year, the last year, at the South Campus to be super positive and for the students to go out to their next step in their education, thinking that this was a really positive place for them this last year. And to do that, what we've tried to do is take many of the middle school goals, and I wasn't trying to plagiarize, but our staff took the middle school goals and our goals and we combined them with the emphasis on trying to be as integrated in our approach as we move forward for this next year while we're in this planning year. Thank you. Some key things that are key to our planning. We continue to be organized by our advisory classes. We have 8 advisory classes. We're continuing in our second year of our Caring School Community Curriculum, which is our social emotional curriculum that we've adopted, K-8. We have monthly equity themes. We're always focused on our ROAR code, Cougars Roar. Of course, that's classic respect, observing the rules, acting responsibly, and being ready to learn. We do a school store as a reward for students when they earn their pause rewards, which are when they're caught doing really positive things. And we run one of the things that I think is super cool with our student voice is that the students in their advisory class actually run our monthly assemblies. They set them up. They're key to doing the assembly themselves. And it's always run around our themes. Again, we're going to do second year of student-led conferences in November, which was remarkable, where we went from, about a 65% participation rate with families to in the 90s when it comes to your opportunity to sit down with your own child and have them tell you how things are going in their class with them, and for them to share their successes and the areas of improvement and growth they may need to be successful over the coming year. Of course, we are continuing, like I said, to align with the middle school goals, and we're planning around the transition for next year. If you look at our iReady data from last year, again, it's super exciting to see how many students were moved. If you look at this grade 5 and grade 6, our green part of our triangle became massive and our red significantly shrunk. And that is just super exciting to see. And if you look at our 5th and 6th graders, the movement from the fall to the spring was remarkable in statistical terms from my perspective. You can also look at this later. It'll be posted on the slideshow. If you look at our next slide, which is about math, we had a similar look. And if you look at that 5th grade green band going from 18% to 48%, by any statistical reason, that is a huge improvement in growth. And I'm super excited about the performance of our 5th and 6th graders. Next. This year, as we approach the school year, we have some challenges ahead. And as you can see from their placement on the right chart over there, we are doing pretty well with some key components of ELA. Again, we seem to have phonics pretty down. We seem to have high frequency words in a place where we can move forward, but we're still struggling in those areas of comprehension and especially informational text, trying to figure out how to move students in a positive direction in that area. Math on our next slide is similar. And again, we have lots of opportunity. As I like to say, we have some students that are struggling and students that we're going to move forward. And I'm super excited about the work that we're going to do this school year. It is concerning when you have so many students in that at-risk band at the top of the triangle, trying to get them to a place where they can meet standard. And our teachers are diving right into that work on a daily basis in their PLCs weekly so that they can try to help support that growth. Our goal is the school district goal. We've adopted it as a school. We have our RJ Ed and Community Circle goal for restorative justice. These are the look fors that we're looking for on the right. I won't read all of them, but many of them are structurally, in my opinion, already set up in how we do our advisory programming and how we have set up the school for social emotional success. And these are the look fors that we're looking for as a team to show that we are being successful in goal number 1. Goal number 2 is right around our UDL and restorative practice engagement. And with UDL, we're doing the same process that Mrs. Richards described so well in our PLC Wednesdays, describing strategies that can be used in class and aligning those across the district, but more importantly, trying to align with things that will be successful as the students move up to the middle school. All right. We've added a goal of 80% making at least one grade level on the iReady assessment. I'm sure we will far exceed that. And these are some of the look fors that we use to attend to that goal and make sure that we are being successful. Now my privilege to pass this on to Mrs. Kayla Phillips.
Any comments or questions from board members or those in the audience? Let's get a mic for you, Bill.
Yeah, what was the CCSS? Okay,
Just for those on Zoom, Common Core State Standards.
so you are teaching phonics. And you've been doing that year after year, correct? That's great.
Correct.
That's fantastic.
And we're also in the middle of a reading adoption, an ELA adoption. Mrs. Phillips might want to talk about that a little bit. She's leading that effort, but that'll be in the 5, 6, 7, 8 grade band and probably will include 3 and 4 too, right?
The ELA adoption committee is looking at 3 through 12 right now. The 3 through 6 group is piloting a curriculum right now called Into Reading, which targets every subtest and sub area that they could think of, including phonics.
Any other questions?
I just had a couple of things that jumped out at me. Part of my method of learning is finding things that jump out at me and responding back. So that's why I keep having these things that come up. I love the student directed or run assemblies. That's just seems to me like a fantastic way to get such buy-in from the students, because when you're part of making it, it's really important. So I love that. I love seeing the celebrations of students and student work and such in that, creating that community. I love that. That's been one of the things that's jumped out to me in the CEE surveys, that students previously weren't seeing that a lot, and they've been seeing that a little bit more and more. So seeing that focus is fantastic. And this is not just to you, but includes you, that seeing the change from fall to spring assessments is just amazing. It just, seeing the hard work that the staff does to get that progress in our students is just so amazing, and such a credit to you and everyone working at your buildings. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And I'd also highlight that not only is from fall to spring, right? But also if you look across the grade bands, here we are at 3rd grade, and this is where we wind up in 10th and 11th grade. And it's just remarkable that you want to see that curve in our system, that we just continue to fly higher and higher as we get older. And that's really a credit to our high school and our middle school and all of our teachers.
Thanks. Okay. Kayla Phillips, representing, and again, a privilege to be a part of the middle school. Pretty linear thinker myself, so I kind of look at this as a focus, and then the 3 goals that were laid out by the board to Dr. Mocha, we looked at as a group. The first 2 seem to align pretty well, and I think you're going to see some vertical themes here from elementary on forward, especially those first 2. And then that 3rd one is in mind, but we didn't create a 3rd goal specific to it for our school improvement. I'll try to be conscientious of our acronyms. I live with a non-educator, and I'm constantly translating, so apologies on that end of things. Some focuses for us with our students right now: continue to engage and participate in building culture, age appropriate and inclusive of all students. We're recruiting right now, getting more students to become representatives for our ASB population. So inviting students who weren't there in the spring, or students who have maybe found a nudge into their voice in that. For teachers right now, and you'll see these in our goals, collaboration with that UDL and RJ Ed, similar to what Susie and her team is doing. We're digging into that. And again, working with that, RJ Ed is restorative justice or restorative practices, and building that muscle memory in those community circles. And something I really found in those is, and this was brought up in training, is those community circles should be joyful and fun and engaging for all. So it's really cool to walk into a math class and see that facilitated with that lens in mind. And specific to my focus, we're starting the evaluation process, and this is one called Trust-Based Observations. It's a link if you want some fun reading. in addition to the Danielson, a way for me to kind of embed and engage in classes. And then kind of in the back of my mind and a constant in conversations is that reconfiguration. And then facilitating opportunities for celebration and student success. We talk a lot about how we keep moving the goalposts and kind of pausing to remind ourselves of the celebrations. I'm being pushed along, so you did. That's okay. I'm reading the room. And then that 6-8 grade level focus, looking at multiple ways of participation in the reconfiguration process. Whether it's just via email, whether it's meeting, whether what level and what area is where any people want to jump in on. Like somebody today was like, I don't care what my room is, but I want to talk about what our bell schedule could look like and how I can work with the 9th grade teacher and the new 6th grade teacher, and we can be more in line. So helping people find their spot in that is something we're looking for. And again, developmentally appropriate transitions. So our 3 goals, the first one, and I had shared a document with you guys earlier, earlier today to highlight a little bit more in depth because there's a lot of language in there. So I thought I'd give you some pictures to highlight some things. For example, this is a community circle today. This was a health class and they were having their sex education conversations in a circle style. And it was very respectful and a well facilitated conversation. So that's an example of it for you. So our first goal is looking at right aligned to Dr. Jeff's the RJ Ed, that restorative practices program to build culture and positive student staff relationships established. So rather than hitting all 3, so I made the UDL alignments. They're in that extended document and then measurements as well. But what you might look for if you were to come into the middle school and walk around with me, we are in our 2nd year with our collaborative classroom that is explicitly taught in our advisory. We have advisory 4 days a week. Those community circles and that tier 1 support in classrooms and advisory. So the idea for us is thinking about those community circles, both in advisory, but also as a measure to do some exam review or do some deepening of our learning and content versus simply an advisory level process. Athletics and sports, I have 112 students in a fall sport. So when they are leaving at 12:30, it's all of a sudden quite a quiet place in comparison. So yeah, it's like 68% of middle school students are in a fall sport. In addition to, we have a CAST program with our student support team that's building really explicit coping mechanisms and skills to manage emotional regulation in a really explicit manner. We have Math Olympiad starting. We have a lunch art group, which is looking for kind of a less sensory driven experience at lunch. Pretty fun. Like I said, those student reps where we meet monthly and they give input and they help to facilitate through the process of project planning on school-wide activities. We're going to have a harvest hangout at the end of the month, and their input and their facilitation of that is how these things live and die. They bring input on school culture, the celebrations, and how we want to spotlight one another, staff, students. Our high school peer tutors, or I missed one, the 4 days a week of advisory. Really fun to see. This is the one true time where they have mixed grade levels. So 7th and 8th are intermixed with a teacher they might not have this year. So they're getting to come back to a teacher they had last year or experiencing a teacher they might have next year. The high school peer tutors, we have in each math period, and they rotate between the 7th grade math, 8th grade math, and then our resource room math. So we have peer role models, peer tutors, supporting throughout the day. But this is another cool thing. This picture on the bottom left is, I'm reading you, Joe. It's fine. The bottom left is our yearbook team. They have a goal of every student to be present in the yearbook 3 times, which I thought was a really cool goal that they chose to select, that they're very conscious of. Yes, thank you. The second one is alignment to the Universal Design for Learning and Restorative Practices to create a learning environment supportive of all students. Some of those look for, as you might see, classroom agreements. That picture in the middle, I know you can't read it specifically, Joe, and I looked at it today. These are class norms that are written by students, with students, they all signed, and it's framed in their classroom. It's really cool. And I think of it as a stranger test. If I get to be a sub, walk into that classroom, what do I need to know about that class? I could go through and read the norms and expectations and be able to reference it. So it's really cool how this classroom has it so proudly displayed. They've all signed it. Just self-manage with regard to classroom. It's really cool to see. And then a lot of these you've seen, we've talked about with regard to Universal Design for Learning, the walkthroughs. People paired up with their best teacher buddy last year and had a really good time with that. And one of our goals with our IPP work is to continue that and aim for 2 this year. And normalizing with students, we learn from one another. When I pop into your room, it's because I'm curious, because I want to see the learning. I want to learn alongside you. And so does your science teacher wants to do so in your English class, and normalizing that process of us as lifelong learners too is pretty fun.
IPP.
Thank you. Inclusionary Practices Program, which is supportive of the Universal Design for Learning program. Thank you. Another one we've been working a lot with, both within the middle school and then for those above and below us, is that vertical alignment of skill development. So those human skills, but also the note-taking skills. The science department is looking at, when I start teaching note-taking in 7th grade, what does it look like in 8th grade? And then have they mastered it 9th and above? So that whatever they see as they move along in this content, whatever's appropriate is modeled. So that's one that's been really cool to see. A couple photos there. That's financial fitness. They were pricing out the cost of a smartwatch. So it's a really fun class to walk into, and they're going to ask you about your personal finances, your mortgage, your interest rates. And they're just really starting to think about how they budget and finance and what might be worth your value. And then below is one of our pilots from our ELA class. This was day 1 of book clubs, which has a really structured format. But it's really cool if you're walking through, you might get handed the rubric. And so you can pop in with a group and look for key learning components. Thank you. The third one mimics the same with that iReady. 80% of students to line up to that Danielson evaluation. A lot of teachers, and not all, might utilize this as their growth goal. But the goal of this is so we can align together, and how does science support the growth in reading? That informational text tends to stand out, which I'll show you here in a minute. So how can my non-ELA teachers support growth in their iReady scores? So how do we do this? Those look fors you might look through, a lot of the Universal Design for Learning. What I like about iReady is it gives you this formula for data chats. So it gives you a way that you can show students, here's where we're at right now. Here's a goal for you. Here's what we call a stretch goal. What do we do together in order to help you meet those goals? So it's not just a snapshot, but it's a conversation about, hey, here's what you're doing really well in. Here's where we might target, and here's where we're going to really focus in on so we can grow there together. Here's a snapshot of our reading for fall, beginning of the year. We like green. And part of what we do with this information, really highlighting zoning in that red, and this is longstanding. So we're looking at some interventions with our ELA adoption of how do we target vocabulary? We feel like we can close that gap. So we're looking at some of our piloting materials, and going to track that data pretty tightly this year. And that yellow gap is small, but it's still a big focus of ours. And how do we continue to push that? Same with math. We're seeing a little bit more of that red in the number and operations. That's, in the 5th and 6th grade years where you were really finalizing that was when those kiddos were remote. So slowing down and making sure that we have those skills really targeted so that when we get into those multi-step calculations that we feel really solid there, and informing our practice of how do we use this data and information so that when kids have some downtime, they know an area they could target so that it's not wasted time in their class. Last one, I promise. So just focus the next steps for the next week or two, along with all of the rest of the buildings. We're looking at our growth goals tied to our school improvement plans, and bringing in our UDL and our equity practices into that. In the next couple of months, our IPP team is working on modification and implementing our peer-to-peer walkthroughs, observation tools for all the teachers. And then again, that professional development centered around our teachers, and the feedback we get through that process. And then year-long, grow and develop that school culture using those tier 1 work restorative practices with all students and staff. That tier 1 can feel so good to get to be in a circle, community circle, working with kids and laughing. What's really nice about doing those circles too is I'll have one of those altercations like Susie was talking about, And essentially we can use a language now of like, well, can we circle up? And they know what that means. They understand the process, and those things can be taken care of in a matter of 20, 30 minutes. Whereas, so that's the universal way that we know how to problem solve now, which feels really good. And co-facilitating with another adult to gain confidence there is something pretty fun. And then looking for how do we welcome the 5-6 campus to be an inclusive campus for next year and then beyond.
Yeah, I was just going to note that. Lori Johnson Langley says, I love hearing about the student-directed goal setting and sharing with parents. So powerful for kids. Anyone here?
On goal number 2, I believe, there was decentering the teacher. Comment on that, or do you need more information
No,
from me?
that's a great question. This idea is part of our equity work, working with our equity TOSA, the idea that this classroom should not be a stand and deliver classroom. As the teacher, the instructor, you have information, but rather than talking and assuming you have all the knowledge, you work within your classroom and you allow student voice and you allow input, feedback from your students. I have a teacher at the end of every unit, she gets a grade from her students on how she did, so that she is maximizing the use of her class time for student learning. Because what is good for her might not always be what's best for her classroom. So she's allowing that feedback and input from students to take ownership in their learning, to get them more engaged and have some ownership of it, and then also be able to balance for what the needs of the students might be.
Yeah, and it also, from my understanding, really helps with those who learn in different ways. Myself, I don't learn auditorially very well. So when you get into a discussion or working on a project together, something tactile or visual, that can really help. So when you're decentralizing it, the classroom, and turning it from that stand and deliver, which, while a fantastic movie, is not a great way for a lot of students to learn. When you can shift it from that, more of the students can learn better.
Okay, and you got assessment retakes.
It's a great question. So rather than this one and done idea of a test, the SAT, for example, our friends took today, is one snapshot in time. It's the idea that we get retakes a lot in life. So I took a test one day and I had just come back and I was sick the day before and I missed review. So a lot of teachers are working with students on what can we do to help you show me mastery of the skill versus this one and done grade that's going to pull your grade down, going to really make you have some students really struggle with, well, there goes my grade and they're done for the rest of the year. It's the idea of let's retake this assessment, show me your understanding and mastery so that you can master the skill, we can move on and you stay engaged with the class.
What's the lowest grade that they can make? Can they make a 0 or a 50 or
Most of our teachers were setting our baseline of assessment at 50%.
50?
Yeah.
So they can't make a test grade below 50.
They could, but through our training and knowledge and our continued process, we're realizing that a numerical value of 0 versus 50 to start with, it'd be pretty hard to come back from. So working with a student who did not do well and say, okay, we didn't do well. What do we do to improve this grade to show your understanding so we can move forward together? If a kid gets a 0 on a test and their grade is at 12%, it's going to be really hard to want that kid to be engaged with you the rest of the year because they feel like I'm never going to get back from that. So working with them to say, well, here's our baseline of 50, show some mastery so you can understand the concepts and stay engaged and stay a part of our class community.
Okay, and you mentioned small groups. Does the class generally get together as a whole and then move into small groups? Is that what happens, or are they always in small groups?
That's a great question. Depends on the class, depends on the day, depends on where they're at in a unit. For example, those book clubs, they were on day 1. The second day, they knew right away, they came together. Every day, every beginning of every class period, they go through their planners. Students take home a planner. We're working on those skills. And then they pretty immediately knew the process of what their small group looks like. So on any given day in any given class, you might be in your small group for 7-8 minutes. It might be a turn and talk for 30 seconds, or it might be the majority of the period. It's just an opportunity for student voice versus that traditional stand and deliver. My teacher gives me all the information. I digest it and leave.
Thanks.
I love to see the touch on goal 3 of outreach and participation on how the reconfiguration is going to work and getting that staff voice and student voice. And I know that's something we talked about during the process of our decision, but it's wonderful to see that in practice and coming through in practice. And you got to, I hadn't really connected with this before, that the middle school is getting 2 grades this year. That's a big, like the entirety of the South Campus is going to the middle school this
We're
year.
just
It's-
gonna pick them up
yeah.
and give them a hug and welcome in. Yeah.
yeah, that's really. Yes, for those on Zoom, the incoming students will be the majority, and that's and that connection that you two have as administrators and in building that co-community is going to be fantastic for that. I know that's going to go wonderfully. I love other opportunities besides sports, like the lunch art group. I think that's a fantastic way to engage those students who have other passions. And I've heard that now in a bunch of these different meetings. In the ELA one at the last presentation at the last meeting about finding a student's passion and nourishing it. And I love that. I love the creation of the classroom norms. I love that it looks like a Declaration of Independence or something with all the signatures at the bottom. It just, yeah, as a history nerd, that makes my heart sing. And I love the gamifying stretch goals, the idea of stretch goals of, yeah, here's your goal, but you could go beyond that and get, I love the gamification there.
And iReady actually gives us that. So they give them those measures that students, and I think when you can see that and it seems more tangible, is where we really start to see their ability to understand, like, yes, here's where you are and here's where we think you'll hit if you keep on this track. Here's where you can get if you really invest your time into this.
Yeah, and I know that's something that some neurodivergent individuals have an issue of seeing that end goal. So seeing not only the 3, but also the 4, I think is fantastic for them. So I love that.
Good evening. Stuck. I am too, Joe. There we go. As I get started, I wanted to share some numbers from last year because I think it's an opportunity to celebrate as a district. Is our South Whidbey High School, South Whidbey Academy graduation rates of the class of 2022 was 97.3%. And the state average is 83%. I mean, that is remarkable. I think that's a testament to the high school staff, but also the K-12 system, the school board, the superintendent, everyone. So again, I really think that that's something we should be really proud of, especially through the COVID difficulties that we had. And just to kind of break that down, we had 89 of 90 South Whidbey High School seniors graduate and 20 of 22 South Whidbey Academy students graduate, which is remarkable. And I think we need to remember South Whidbey Academy, Charlie Davies and Christine Amundsen working with our students. And the 5 of the students from South Whidbey Academy that graduated last year, we had 1 from Cedar-Woolley, 1 from Oak Harbor, 1 from Coopville, 1 from Everett, and another student that was in our district that wasn't engaged. And these are students that weren't engaged in their districts and heard about Charlie and our program and came to us. So I want you to know that the word is out regionally. So again, thank you to Charlie and Christine. Also, I think about every year I give you a breakdown of what our graduates do. And it's a little different last year. Usually we have about 70 to 75% of our students move on to a 4-year or 2-year school. That's a little below that number. And again, I think this is COVID related, and talking with our students that moved on is we have more students that went right into the workforce and are kind of unsure on whether they want to go to college or not. And we had a big increase in the gap year. And most of those 6% of the students that are doing the gap year are planning on returning to college or going to college. So it was just a little different wrinkle, I think, but it's something I wanted to share and let you know what our students are doing. I put this slide in just to kind of explain what we've been doing as a staff for several years is we're all interconnected, everything that we do. Like today, for example, our staff meeting is centered around our individual teacher student growth goals. And those student growth goals are connected and are part of our district goals 1 and 2. So every one of our student growth goals will be connected with our South Whidbey School District goals, number 1 and number 2. And that goes with our department goals are all connected with our district goals. Our school improvement plan obviously is connected with our district goals. My goals, as I'm evaluated by Dr. Mocha, are going to be connected with our district goals. So I just want you to show that there's that alignment through our whole system. The part of the process too, and I think I shared this with the board, is some information from our teachers. Is what we first do in our process to create the SIP is we took goal 1 and 2 for our district goal 1 and 2, and we talked about it. What does that mean to us? What are we currently doing? Our practices, our systems that support those goals, and what do we need to implement as far as practices and systems to make sure that we achieve those goals in our building for the district? So again, our individual teachers will write down, I think I shared the information with you, a lot of information, a lot of raw commentary, and not only what are we doing, but how are we evaluating, how are we assessing, how are we making sure that we achieve those goals? And that also comes from the teachers. Then we break down into departments, and then as a staff, we talk about, okay, what are the general guidelines and points that we're going to follow for our school improvement plan? That's what I'll share with you tonight. The first goal, goal 1, which again is our district goal, is culture of care. Our supports are restorative justice, and I think we've all talked about that, education. And what I am thrilled and excuse me, very optimistic about, we start off every staff meeting with a community circle with our staff. So my first tier 1 question was, pineapple on pizza, yes or no? Yes or no, thumbs up or thumbs down. See, there was some controversy on that. But we kind of got to what I would consider for a staff a tier 2 question. And that discussion was really centered around grading, how we grade. It's more, we have students, we need to break this mentality of what do I do to get an A? And it's not about that. It's about our students being able to critically think, learn concepts, and be able to keep that knowledge. So again, also we've done restorative circles, proud of our staff. Again, we've done them with whole classes, restorative circles with some issues in classes. We've done student and student restorative circles. We've done student staff restorative circles. So we also do it every week in our advisory. Every Wednesday we have community circles. So it's something that I'm proud of my staff. They really enjoy it and they like it. And it's something that I think is going to be really good for our school. Student voice, the main point I want to throw out there that we're implementing this year is what we call called House of Reps. And each advisory class will have a representative from their advisory class. And every month we will have a meeting, and it'll be community circle style. And this is an opportunity for students, instead of just our ASB leaders and officers and just, some of the usual students that we hear from and get voice, that we have more diversity in voice. So that's the opportunity to come together in our House of Reps. What are the issues at school? What can we change? How can we help? They get information and they take it back to their advisory class. And so it's a connection. So we'll have even more student voice. So that's something I'm looking forward to and excited about. Our student support team has just been phenomenal. Our Island County counselors and our ESD counselors, we again have a real powerful team, and we have a list of about 75 students that we talk for about an hour and a half every week about check-in, support services, community, etc. And again, it's been something I think real helpful the past 3 years since we've implemented it. And again, we're not letting students fall through the cracks, put it that way. And it's great that staff are referring students. Staff are more aware of what our students are going through. There's more of that personal connection instead of just student teacher. We know who our kids are, and I love seeing that. And again, I have to brag about our Forefront Suicide Prevention Program. We are a model school in the state of Washington, and we are actually to the point where we're working with other high schools around the state in implementing this program. And we have students that train students. We have students that train staff. So again, we have a great group, and that's also in conjunction with our Mental Health Awareness Club. Again, our goal is our classrooms to be safe community spaces. Students create community norms, much like Kayla talked about with the middle school. You go in a lot of our classrooms and they have the same norms that the students create with the teachers. And so obviously there's more buy-in, and then you feel like more ownership in that space as a student. So we appreciate seeing that. Again, care and joy. I think it's great to be back this year in some different circumstances. Our students are smiling more. Well, they're not wearing masks so you can see them. But again, the school spirit and just the feeling of the school has been so great for the start of the school year. So that's been phenomenal. And again, this is not just talk, is that we are making sure, especially in our advisory, that every one of our students has an adult member that they can go to. Adult staff member. If they're having issues, they need somebody to talk to, they have a trusted adult that they can go to. And we are doing that with our advisories. We're surveying students on whether they have that opportunity and that person. So again, that's something we're focusing on. The measurement, lots of different measurements. And again, if I was going to put all the information that we worked on as a staff, I'd have about 100 slides. So we just took the general concepts. The CEE survey data, of course, is, I think, really important and powerful for our staff to see, for our students, and for our community. We look at our OSPI discipline rates. And again, I'm kind of going back in time to last year. I think about some situations where maybe there was a discipline issue where we could have approach that differently in a restorative circle. And I think it would have been probably more beneficial and helpful. And again, because we're not looking to be punitive, we're looking to help the student or students with not so much the behavior, but the cause of the behavior. That's what we need to remember. Usually you're just seeing kind of the tipping point instead of what's going on with that student behind the scenes. Our exclusion day rates, that's basically our suspensions, and those have gone down the past 5 years, and that will continue. And I think restorative circles are just going to improve and enhance that. Our healthy youth survey, again, that will come out, I believe, in April, I think. But anyways, that's another piece of data that we use as a staff and look at and see where our students at. I think it's pretty comprehensive. Something that I stopped doing during COVID, but I'm doing it again, is I'm going to meet with every freshman one-on-one interview, and I will have a series of questions and just to know more about them, where they're coming from and their struggles and what they need help with. And not just freshmen, but I traditionally have talked to seniors kind of as an exit interview, every senior on the way out in the spring. I'll do that this year, and every new student just to see how they're doing that. In fact, I've already talked to every new student and just check in. How are you doing? How are things going? Student participation numbers and activities such as clubs and athletics have been through the roof. Our club fair was a big to-do. We have 14 clubs going strong and lots of participation. I would guesstimate 85% of our students are involved with something right now. We would like 100%, but that's pretty phenomenal. Attendance data has been improving, and I think that's, again, COVID related, but that's something we need to look at, because if a student doesn't feel safe and comfortable at school, they're not going to come to school. And anecdotal, listening to students, parents about their experiences, whether positive or negative, and sharing that with staff too, in a general way, I think is effective. Best practices for learning, again, pre-assessments, beginning of each semester. Who are our students? Where are they at? Depending on the subject area, we do a lot of pre-testing, and because of COVID too, especially math and some things like that, we really have to go back to Algebra 2. We have to go back and teach Algebra 1 for a couple of weeks refresher, and we do that with a lot of our subjects. And again, students need to be agents of their learning and engage in critical thinking. Again, I go back to this. It's not about grades. It's not about how do I get an A. It's about how am I going to use this information in my life and how am I going to retain it. Communication with guardians and students, obviously Parent Square, Google Classroom. I think Google Classroom If there is a positive COVID, it forced every one of our teachers to use Google Classroom, and now we're all experts in that. And I think that's a real good way for our students and our parents to track kids in Skyward too. Obviously, as CTE director, I have to throw in some college and career ready preparation. And one of it is we have the Voice, and that's a traditional interest survey that all of our students do. And also our high school and beyond plan, we actually start in middle school. So they start thinking about, you know, I put up the slide about what they're doing their 13th year. What are you going to be doing? They need to start thinking about that in 7th and 8th grade, and they can always change, but it's something that we constantly in advisory at the high school level, we work on it about once a month, and it's a digital document through Skyward. CT offerings, we have about 25, maybe 27 students right now doing various programs at Snow Isle, and that's been phenomenal for them. And a lot of those students are actually the ones that went straight to work. So they learned a trade and learned skills and went right to work in some pretty high paying jobs already. I think we've all talked about UDL and IPP. It's really looking at, and it goes in hand with the bottom section too about culturally responsive teaching, is really what are we teaching, who are we teaching, and how can we differentiate instruction for different populations of our students to make sure that we meet the needs of each and every one of them. And that's with our curriculum, our pedagogy, and also our verbiage, which is something I think we've really worked on. Pronoun use, you know, even going back 3 years ago, what are microaggressions? You know, just being really reflective and cognizant of what we are saying as teachers and staff members. I think we've seen great improvement with that. The best practices, again, for learning measurements, these are a little easier to quantify. We don't have, you know, the iReady like K-8 does. We do interim assessments, especially as we get closer towards the state assessments, because we found that just the kids just getting used to the tool that they're using, that they're testing with, helps them a lot. But just kind of getting a sense and getting them comfortable with the process. As you probably are aware that our state scores have always been above state level, state average, but they always should be. And we have still a lot of room for improvement. I always kind of worry about math because I saw a dip since pre-COVID, and we're back above state average, but I think we can go higher on that. So that's kind of an area of concern and something that our math department have been working really hard on. Of course, every classroom, we have summative and formative evaluations. And, you know, I think some of that was shared in the information that I shared with the board. Our SAT, PSAT scores, I really didn't want to use that as a measuring tool the past couple of years. And a lot of colleges are going away from that, which is good, but that's always been really good to kind of compare not just statewide how we're doing, and we're usually above the average, but also nationwide, how are our students doing. Graduation rates, which we have to be very pleased with. We already talked about that. Post-high school matriculation, we talked about that. And state assessments by student demographics. So I take the SBAC and I break it down by different populations: gender, race, socioeconomic, and special ed. And seeing where is there disparity? Is there a 5% plus or minus in a certain area? And how do we address that? And I do the same thing with our AP classes. We want to make sure that we have equal access and that we have a diverse group of students taking those classes and the opportunity. And that can be as simple as encouraging students to take those classes and getting involved. Curriculum resource review by department, and we talked about that, and that goes back to the culturally responsive teaching about pedagogy, curriculum, and verbiage. And teacher-student growth goals. I don't know if anybody's mentioned this yet, but I think it's 2024. Dr. Mochi, you might help me, but the culturally responsive teaching is going to be, and the SEL is going to be part of the Danielson teaching rubric. And so we talked about that today as a staff, and that's something we're going to have some goals centered around that. And so it'll be fully implemented by 2024, but we're already starting with that. Any questions?
I just had a couple of comments Bill, go ahead.
Is the
The word guardian, is that the same guardian as I understand that somebody doesn't have parents and they have a guardian?
Yeah, Rufus, we have students
No.
who,
Doesn't matter.
oh,
Yeah.
parents, guardians, caregivers. We have students that may not live with traditional parents, may live with grandma or grandpa or foster parents, or there's many different.
Yeah,
We
so-
use the generic guardian.
Yeah.
And it could be a parent or a non-parent.
So some of those meetings had students, staff, and guardians or their parents there as well.
Whoever their legal guardian is, whether it's a parent or somebody else.
But
We use
parents are
guardian.
included in these meetings. Okay.
Guardian is the generic. It could be the parent. It's the person in guardianship.
Okay, it just didn't say parents in that meeting is all I'm saying.
Guardian is inclusive of the
That-
parents if the parents are the legal guardian.
Those two terms are synonymous.
Or it's
Guardians
a
is-
square and rectangle
Guardian
issue.
is inclusive of parent. It's the overarching term. Parent is, we don't imply parent as the only guardian anymore.
It's like every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. Every parent who has legal guardianship is a guardian, but not every guardian is a parent.
Correct.
So
Okay.
whoever has
Okay.
legal guardianship will be in that.
Say, let's
meeting.
say it differently. Whoever is in the primary parental role is the person. We use guardian as that term.
Also, then you have the OSPI discipline rates.
Yeah, basically what that is every year we turn into to us OSPI our discipline infractions for various things. So basically we look at, for lack of a better term, our violations or our students have been written up, et cetera. And we tally that and we keep track of how many students and what different categories are involved.
So the state looks at that,
Yeah, the state looks at,
evaluation goes, or
yeah, well, they'll look at how many students we've suspended, and some of the higher things like threat, expulsion, and some things like that, exceptional misconduct.
It is on the report card for every district in the state. If you go to OSPI's website and look at school report card, you can find discipline data on every district.
so the state doesn't come back and say we don't like the way you're doing in discipline. They just use it as an evaluation.
It's
what?
it's on there. If it's exceptionally high, you might get a call. But they monitor all of those things, including assessment data and so on. And if a school district is in need of improvement, they will help you.
Thank you.
I love the diversity of steps after school and the CTE offerings and all of that, particularly the language in goal 2, the goals of their choice, which affects you more than the other principals. You're building more than the other buildings. And I love seeing the emphasis there because four-year college doesn't work for every student, as you know better than I do. But I love seeing that you're keeping that in mind and keeping that in your forefront, that there are students who want to go straight into a work training or straight into work or into the military or wherever they're going. And I love seeing the emphasis in keeping with that subline of the goal.
And Brooke, I think you're aware that there are 9 pathways for graduation that students have to follow. And one of the big increases we've had is CTE.
I love that we're being an example for others for the Forefront program. I think that's fantastic. I think that really speaks to the desire to be a community in our school, to look out for your fellow students and everyone at the school. And I think that's fantastic. I love that. I mean, I know that everyone's doing this at every level, but that you're disaggregating that student achievement and discipline data to see if there's anything that's standing out. I'm sure that you're on top of this, but I think that this is something that might be concerning some members of the community as you're pushing some students in of other groups into AP classes, is there room in AP classes for everyone who wants to, as long as it works in their schedule?
Yes, because
Yeah.
I would like to have more AP classes. So basically the students, the amount of students that sign up for a class is the number of sections that I'll schedule. So I would like to have more.
Excellent.
Yep.
I knew that was the answer. I just wanted to get it out in public.
I'm just generally very excited. I held my comments while each of you presented because I knew there was a lot of material to cover tonight, but the strength of your plans and the evidence showing student success and growth and the thread through a student's well-being straight through to their achievement and their success at and after graduation. I just see the continuity of the caring relationships that you're building in kindergarten and before kindergarten and carrying through after graduation. I'm so proud of our district and so grateful to each of you. Thank you.
I was very pleased to hear about, I think I got the comment correctly. How will I use what I'm learning? How do you go about describing the differences of when I think there's with my grandchildren who are here, who have gone through the school district, my own children here, there are hard classes and there are easy classes. How are the potential value of the hard classes that are basic to advanced education in many cases presented to the students that are shying away from them? Is there an effort made to encourage students who have ability, but also just want to skate, to take the difficult classes, they suffer the results of a lower grade point average, but gain the advantage of having a much more useful life ahead of them? How do you go about doing that?
Speaking for the high school, and it's probably K-12, but we really focus on differentiated instruction, not just remediation, but enrichment. We have some of our freshman and sophomore classes where our students who maybe the material is easy for them and they are very bright students have the opportunity to get what we call the honors designation. And so our teachers encourage that, where they will have a standalone separate project, something like that, where they'll have an honors designation. So say it's, let's take chemistry. They take chemistry and they want to have an honors chemistry designation. Those students are encouraged that are really already highly motivated to take that class, that they can also be challenged even further.
I can also add, as a parent of two students who are currently in the high school and one recent Southwood Bee Academy graduate, that I've just seen the counseling staff being extremely engaged and proactive about engaging with my students about discovering and identifying their strengths, working on their growth areas, and taking the classes that are going to be right for them, both to challenge them where they are and to take them where they hope to go. And the counselors have been really supportive in helping my daughters keep their choices open in terms of perhaps, considering a career pathway, but keeping that college pathway open in case that's the direction they choose, that sort of thing. So I've really appreciated the quality of the guidance counseling at the high school level.
I'll tie it back into my goals 1 and 3, I guess. Using our iReady data, we looked at some diagnostics of, do we have kids placed in the right class? And some kids who scored really high in math, we thought, wow, I think they could handle algebra. So what we do is we then fall back to, what kind of relationship do I have with this kid? And who's going to be the best person to then go and say, hey, I see you have the XYZ skills, you're scoring here, I think you have it. Let's have a conversation about, are you ready for it? So we're tying it all back to, what's the relationship the student has with the teacher, having that conversation together, and then using our data to help inform the placement of our kiddos.
The things that were behind my question to some degree are the experience I had with my own daughters and my grandchildren here, who were capable and in some cases perhaps above average. And they were ahead of the class, and so they were utilized as TAs, which I didn't know what that meant. Of course, I know now. In a situation where a student, several in my family, have been used as teachers' assistants, made me feel like they weren't getting the attention that would help them the most, the individual child the most. A teacher's assistant may be useful to the teacher, but I don't understand how it's particularly useful to a student who could be doing more advanced work instead of being a teacher's aide. Is that an issue at any level in our school district?
Right now, I think we have about 12 high school students that are, I guess you could call teachers assistants, but they're actually peer mentors that go down to the middle school classes and math classes and some other classes and help tutor. And some of those students would like to continue on to be teachers. And I think our students get a lot out of that. So really the TA that you're speaking of is very rare at our school. We don't have a lot of TAs.
I have one anecdote that's 25 years old, so take it or leave it. But I was invited into some AP coursework in high school at South Whitby High School, and it wasn't the choice that I preferred. And after a lot of deliberation, I chose to do a TA position instead. And that experience ignited my love of math for the first time. I was 17 years old when I actually decided that math could be cool. And then I went on to really enjoy advanced math in college. And it allowed me to graduate from college with a 4.0, which I wouldn't have been able to muster if I hadn't been a TA and gotten my math together.
I'd also just note from my own personal experience, I've learned more about, let's make it really real here, about being on a school board by helping bring other people onto the school board than I ever did through the lessons that I've had through WASDA, as valuable as they are. Teaching can really help you master a subject, or being a peer mentor can really help you master a subject if you're helping others with it also. I echo the value of that experience. It's fantastic.
If I could just jump in, our goal is to challenge every student to go beyond what they expect they can do. That is the vision and the mission of this district. And so the relationship that teachers and administrators have with individual students is what guides the student to achieve even more. So we don't have a routine process. Every student is an individual. The guidance counselors are part of that. The teachers, the administrators, part of that. So we don't shuffle anyone. We make sure that we challenge every student to be the best they can be within the limitations of the system. So again, it's based on the individual student. We do have one more slide if we could finish up.
Real quick, I do have a community comment on this from Lori Johnson in Langley. My daughter is a TA, and it has given her additional leadership opportunities and peer mentor, as well as being more productive in her classes because it has built her confidence. So there's an anecdote from a current student or parent of a current student about how that has helped them too.
I'm sorry, I was wrong. We are finished. John was the last.
Well, then I would like to thank, I mean, John left, but he's included in this too. Thank the administrator, the principals, and I know the staff was working on this also, all the hard work that went into this. It's clear and obvious that there's a lot of love and care put into these documents. And it's been fantastic seeing the change in these documents over the past 3 years that I've been seeing them, seeing how they've tied closer and closer to the goals and gotten more into exact methodology for assessment and exact look-fors in classrooms. And it's been fantastic to see that growth over these past 3 years. And I really appreciate the hard work, not just in preparing these, but in working on that growth and that growth mindset to improve those each year. You have set a high standard.
As I started, I'm really proud to work with these folks. And as you can see, it's a demonstrated improvement over the years. They're just doing great work with staff and with students. So thank you for engaging in the process of looking at the school improvement plans.
Had another question. I may have missed it, but are any of our graduating students going into the military? I didn't,
Yes, it was on the first slide.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that in just 1 second.
I didn't see military on there, but it might be included in other.
It's
the
it
high school
is-
principal, I didn't think he mentioned it.
Yeah, I don't see it on
We
this list.
actually have it on the data, though. We do have students that go directly to the military.
How
Um,
many?
After students graduate, we do what's called a leaver assessment, and we
Find it.
reach out to them a year after they've graduated. 1 year after they've graduated, we reach out to every single student and we say, what are you doing? And we're able to,
That included in the briefing tonight, that information?
I don't know that that specific data was in our
That's
presentation.
not part of the school improvement planning process, so it's
But-
not in this data.
But it is data that we collect and we take care
How
of.
do you, how could I access that data?
You can ask for it. If you send me an email, I'll get it for you. Returning to or going out to the military, 1% of our high school graduating class went directly to the military. So 1% of 100 kids would be one student.
And there was another question that had to do with physical fitness. I don't, one of my concerns as an old man is that we have an increasing amount of inactivity, I guess is a good word. A lot of watching television and sitting around, and subsequently a significant fewer young men and women are eligible to go into the military because they are simply not strong enough to do it. Do we have any?
You have data to back that up, Rufus? Because
Certainly,
that's not
yes.
my understanding at all.
Well, there's a huge shortage of people being recruited right now.
Right. I'm not sure it's because of their physical fitness. That's all
No,
I'm
that's
saying.
one of the elements. Only about 15%, I think, is the figure of our age eligible people are qualified to even apply to be in the military.
May I offer an anecdote from tonight's presentation that I found really heartening on that subject? I thought it was amazing to hear what a majority of our middle school students are engaging in middle school athletics. And I think our robust sports program is one way that we're addressing
Yeah,
the risk of a
I
sedentary
agree
lifestyle.
completely, but I'm just wondering, do we grade that at all? Do
Of
we?
course we do. We have requirements in physical education. Mm-hmm.
And we'll actually have. a
And are they
presentation.
reflected in any of these charts that were shown, that our students are maintaining adequate?
We're actually going to have a presentation on physical fitness and other elective activities in December. So we'll get that data.
It wasn't in the
And-
school improvement plans, but we'll talk about it.
And Rufus, it still remains a graduation requirement that students have to have a certain number of PE credit. So
Yeah, I don't want to be gross about this, but there are some children who simply are too pudgy or fleshy, as my grandfather said.
We're going to
wouldn't-
stop.
Rufus?
Rufus,
Rufus, I'm going to call you in a little bit. I don't feel comfortable with the fat shaming that you just shared with us. So
There's no
if you
fact
have
sheet.
if you have a specific question,
I'm talking about students.
right, Rufus, I hear you. There are students of every size and shape in our school district. Their shape and size has nothing to do with who they are as human beings. So I would ask for this type of conversation to stop
Mhm.
or to be addressed to me or another board member by email so that it's not out in a public venue. Thank you so much.
we're not discussing that this evening. We are actually
you, Ann.
discussing our school improvement plans. And I think
Thank you.
our conversation has ended
Yeah,
on that.
I was just going to say, if there's anything else on the school improvement plans. Okay, then thank you all. Another thank you to the administrators who presented, and this meeting is adjourned. Good night.
Thank you, Ann. So sorry.
everyone's fine. It's all good. Okay.
Yep.
Do send me Chris. Good place. So we're getting a little bit of feedback that way. So they're going. No, it's we'll take anything. So yeah, so just check.